Hey there, if you're just joining us, we're going to get started. Welcome back to the third installment of our Lunch and Learn series on ecotourism, where you provide your own lunch and we provide the opportunities for learning. Um, so in this third installment of our three-part series, we're going to hear from Melissa Daigle and Matt Bethel, both of Louisiana Sea Grant. And also we have a guest with us from Delaware Sea Grant, Ed Lewandowski. And these three folks are going to share with us projects that our respective Sea Grant programs have worked on with communities to take on ecotourism ventures. So we're going to hear a little bit about one project that's kind of a little bit more in the beginning stages, had a setback, but is continuing to forge ahead with the path of, this dream of having an ecotourism business. And we'll also hear about another project that is a little bit further along in the process. And again, it's a one where the community is taking on this ecotourism venture. Just a quick step back, as you might notice from the slide here, this is the third installment of our series. And so you might have missed our previous webinars on how you create an LLC, what it is, and also about things like how do you brand your business? How do you get your name out there and get it remembered? So those webinars were each recorded, as is this one right now. And the recordings of those will be available on Louisiana Sea Grant's YouTube page in the upcoming weeks. So be on the lookout in your inbox for an email from me with not only links to those recordings, but also the follow-ups to some of those questions that we didn't get to answer during the Q&A sessions, and also links to some of the resources that were mentioned as well. So check for that in your inbox. Just a quick housekeeping statement. So with this webinar, you might notice that you came in muted. So we're going to ask you to please stay that way, just because we've got a short amount of time together. So we want to make the most of it. So please enter in any questions you have for our guest speakers in the chat box, and we will get to them during the Q&A session, which we will have at the very end before all three of our guest speakers when they're all done talking. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our very first speakers, Melissa Daigle and Matt Bethel of Louisiana Sea Grant.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that okay? All right, so as Emily said, my name is Melissa Daigle, and I'm an attorney with Louisiana Sea Grant. If you were on the first webinar series, I also presented about, how and why to create an LLC. And in this presentation, Matt and I are going to be talking about the Pointe-au-Chien Indian tribe and their desire to have ecotourism and the steps that they have taken to reach that. And so Matt, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, Emily, for hosting us for this webinar series. So yeah, I'm Matt Bethel. I'm the Associate Executive Director for Research at Louisiana Sea Grant. And as Melissa mentioned, been working with her and this community that we're going to be talking about to highlight this particular ecotourism related project called the Pointe-au-Chien Indian tribe down in Lower Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. I've been working with them on resilience and adaptation projects, planning projects for about a little over a decade now. So very familiar with the community, and we're happy to be able to share this particular project with you all today.
And so a little bit background about this project. So we were contacted by the Gulf of Mexico Alliance about some funding that was available to work with Native tribes. And so I reached out to Matt because he had a longstanding relationship with the Pointe-au-Chien, and we reached out to them and we told them our idea. And the way that we started was to do our coastal resilience index. And so if you're not familiar with the coastal resilience index, it's a short self-assessment that a community can go through to kind of develop some areas in which they could improve their resilience to coastal storms. And so that was like our first step in that process.
Yeah, just a little background on the community for you all. So the Pointe-au-Chien Indian community is one of the oldest inhabited communities in the United States. It's a historical Chitimacha community, and the Pointe-au-Chien tribe territory, like I mentioned, is in Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. And it includes diverse natural and cultural resources such as a variety of birds, plants, animals, fish. The tribe has cemeteries there, sacred sites. And historically, tribe members were fishermen, hunters, and farmers. While Pointe-au-Chien continues to be a fishing community, there's a lot of climate-related coastal hazards that threaten its continued existence and ability to thrive. And that photo that Melissa just had up there is a tribe member shared that with us, and it's of a palmetto hut that the tribe members lived in several generations ago. This provides some perspective that for those in the audience, that the tribe has inhabited these lands for generations, hundreds of years, and have adapted over time to remain sustainable in this dynamic ecosystem. And they want to share that unique culture and heritage with visitors. This slide illustrates, kind of gives you an idea of where we're talking about if you're unfamiliar with coastal Louisiana. So you see the red box there is around, encompasses the community and its claimed territories. And if you see New Orleans there, I don't know, Melissa, if you can use your cursor, but anyway, yeah, you see Melissa's cursor is showing you where New Orleans is, where you may be familiar in the Mississippi River, and it's in coastal Louisiana in the Terrebonne Basin. So as I mentioned, what this map illustrates is how the tribe, the community is on the front line of climate change impacts. And particularly the tribe faces combined effects from subsidence and sea level rise, which results in one of the highest rates of relative sea level rise in the world. And what this manifests in land loss. And you can see this map was created to illustrate just the land loss that has occurred since the 1930s to pretty much present day. And you can see all the blue areas there in the coastal zone have been lost and are now open water that were once land, at least back to the 1930s. And Melissa, you can advance the next slide. And so this is a zoomed in area of the land loss map in the previous slide, showing a little more detail of the Terrebonne Basin and the Pointe-au-Chien tribe's traditional lands and how they've been impacted. Again, all the blue areas, the light blue areas are where land once was and then is lost. And you can see Pointe-au-Chien, the green dot there, that's the community. But this is all the area that they claim as traditional lands that they sustain themselves on hunting and fishing and trapping, living off the land. A lot of it has been lost over time. So yeah, this is, I just wanted to, this is another photo that the tribe members shared with us that illustrates this land loss and the impact shown in the map format in the previous slides. And this is a comparison of a photo taken along Pointe-au-Chien Bayou in 1907 at the top, with one taken from the same vantage point in 2017. So you can really, this really illustrates from a ground level the land loss that they have been dealing with and adapting to. But, you know, despite the challenges described and, you know, the tribe's finding capacity to effectively adapt to these increasing risks from coastal hazards, and the tribe is leading many projects to increase its self-sufficiency. And we will talk about one such project Melissa mentioned that the tribe partnered with Louisiana Sea Grant and others on, and how that project relates to developing ecotourism opportunities to diversify and enhance their own economic and cultural resilience initiatives.
Yeah, and so in these pictures, you can see Louisiana Sea Grant has been so fortunate to be able to partner with the Pointe-au-Chien to take researchers out to actually see the coastal landscape and see the issues that they're dealing with. And so these are some of us with tribal members in their boats, and that that kind of started this idea that, there's a great opportunity for them to take more people out, to tell their story, to share what they're experiencing with others, in hopes that not only will people become more informed about why, addressing these hazards is so important, but also, maybe have some impact on helping those issues get addressed. And so this is an aerial photo of where they load up their boats when they do ecotourism tours. And so so this is a Sea Grant group here. You can see the cars parked right along the highway, and the dock is, overgrown. Parts of it were starting to fall into the water, but this was the access point for the tribe. And so as we went through the CRI with them, several action items came out that they could address, but they felt that, addressing a safe and sustainable access point for ecotourism ventures would be really important and could benefit the tribe in a lot of different ways. And so these are some pictures of what we did. So after we did the CRI with them, we wrote up a report, and they were able to turn that report into a application and get some grant funding. And so the Gulf of Mexico Alliance was able to facilitate funding an actual building of a dock area. And so you can see that there's some really tall pilings that can help the larger vessels tie up. It's not meant to be a harbor of refuge, but they have used it for smaller storms to help securely tie up some of their fishing fleet. And it's now a safe place to park, a safe place to walk out and access those vessels without having to climb over, a lot of overgrown shrubbery and it's not falling into the water, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and then this is an aerial photo that a tribe member shared with us of the Pointe-au-Chien village after Hurricane Ida's impact last year. This illustrates the extent of the damage to the community and prompts a discussion around how the tribe was set back around their plans to use the new dock and bulkhead for resilience activity, anchoring ships like Melissa just said, but also they had planned to use it to promote eco tours down the bayou. And that remains a priority for the tribe. And they are thinking about resuming those, that eco tour possibility, that initiative, is part of their overall plan to rebuild and recover. So as you can see from this photo, there was a complete devastation. They're still recovering. Hurricane Ida was if you're not familiar, was a Category 4 storm that made landfall with the eye passed right over Pointe-au-Chien on August 29th, back 2021. It had a maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour, which tied Hurricane Laura back in 2020 and Last Island hurricane back in 1856 as the strongest on record in Louisiana. The hurricane just damaged every home and destroyed or substantially damaged approximately 106 homes and displaced almost all the tribal families for a period of time. And we've talked with elders of the tribe who've lived in Pointe-au-Chien their whole life. They say they've never seen a storm like Ida that wreaked such devastation as a community. So they've got a long way to go to rebuild. They're still rebuilding. We're working on them with recovery and resilience efforts and to rebuild back more sustainable. And part of that is their continued vision for promoting ecotourism in their community, to share their culture, to promote resilient practices with communities who are dealing with similar issues around the world. And they want to continue to do that. They're just we had to take a pause from that right now.
And so this is our contact information. If you have any questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out. And that's it.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt and Melissa. That was really, really fascinating, and it's just very informative. So I'm going to pass the ball over to Ed Lewandowski from Delaware Sea Grant now, who's going to share with us about another ecotourism venture up in Delaware.
Wanishi, Emily, thank you. Wanishi, give me a second here and I'll try to get this started.
Sure.
Can you see the title screen?
Looks great.
Oh, fantastic. So Osio, everyone, Osio, that is hello. Ui Kanawash, good to see you. These are traditional greetings spoken in the Nanticoke tongue. Now, if it was 1879 and you were a Nanticoke child who was enrolled in the Carlisle Industrial School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, those greetings would have been forbidden. The Carlisle School was the first off-reservation Native American boarding school here in this country, and it served as the principal model for more than 350 other schools that followed. Canada even modeled its schools after the Carlisle School. Now, the founder of the Carlisle School was a retired Civil War leader named Colonel Richard Henry Pratt. And Pratt was infamous for having once said, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Now, I suppose that could be translated as destroy the race, but keep the warm bodies around for hard labor. Pratt is also credited with having been the first person to publicly express the term racism here in the United States. So that gives you some indication of what his objectives were. Now, the objective of the Native American boarding school was to civilize or assimilate Native American youth into Euro-American society. So how was this achieved? Well, it was simple. You had to strip the Native American children of their identities. So first, in most cases, students, as they were called, were forcibly removed from their families and from their reservation. Often siblings were separated. They were sent to different schools. And when a child arrived at a school, the first thing that happened was he or she was given an English name. Then their hair was cut to a uniform length. For the boys, this meant that their ponytail was chopped off. Now, this was a culturally important part of being a Native American boy. And all the students, as you can see in this image, were required to wear uniforms. So homogeneity was quickly established. They all pretty much look the same in the photo. The students were also asked to remember the names of the US presidents, and they were absolutely prohibited, forbidden from speaking their native tongue. And the consequences, if you were caught doing so, could be very, very severe. One such punishment was to have a metal pin or pins inserted into your tongue if you were an offender. And after about a week to 10 days, when the scar tissue began to form around that metal pin, they were unceremoniously ripped out of your tongue. So you can imagine how quickly the students learned not to speak their language. And this really became the initial demise of the Native American tongue here in the United States. And this included the Nanticoke tongue. So I was unaware of this tragic story until it was shared with me by Raggy Callentine. Raggy is a traditional storyteller with the Nanticoke tribe. I had heard and saw in some of the headlines news about mass grave sites that were found close to some of the former Native American boarding schools. But when Raggy shared this story with me, it really impacted me. And it began to be the way that I framed how this project would be presented to the public. Now, I first showed up in Laurel, Delaware, where this project is located in 2012 to work on a water quality project. I was there to help the community develop a watershed implementation plan. This is a Chesapeake Bay regulatory requirement. But when that plan was finished, the stakeholders with whom I was working challenged my team to help them bring people and jobs back to downtown Laurel. Laurel at one time was the wealthiest municipality in the state of Delaware. But over the past few decades, its economic malaise had set in, and now it's one of the poorest, with a median family income of around $36,000 per year. So Responding to that challenge, we began to focus our efforts on redevelopment of Laurel's waterfront along its broad creek. It seemed really natural because the creek bifurcates the town and it is an undervalued and underutilized resource. So to start, we led a public conversation that eventually resulted in a landscape level design for waterfront redevelopment that we christened the Ramble. And this design was produced by my colleague, Dr. Jules Bruck, who was the director of our landscape architecture program here at the University of Delaware, but she departed about a week and a half ago for the University of Florida. So a huge loss for us. But Jill's plan was adopted by the town back in 2014, and we've been working aggressively since that time to develop it. One of the proposed components of the Ramble was a nature play area. This nature play area was originally called Governor's Park and Independence Playground because 5 former governors of Delaware hailed from Little Laurel. So it seemed like a fitting tribute to us. But when we really began to do a deep dive into some of the history of the property, we realized that the Nanticoke people were the original inhabitants of this particular parcel. And furthermore, the surrounding 3,000 acres were given to the tribe as a reservation in 1705. Now, subsequently in 1768, those 3,000 acres were taken back by the colonial government. And that started a great migration of the Nanticoke people northward through Delaware, New Jersey, New York, into New England, and even up into Canada. So understanding that this was once indigenous land, we changed our direction with the project and we renamed it Tidewater Park because the word Nanticoke translates as Tidewater people or people of the Tidewater, referring to those low-lying areas of the Chesapeake Bay region. So we still wanted its focus to be nature-based play, and Jules suggested that the play features should reflect some of the folklore of the Nanticoke tribe. Tidewater Park sits on about 4.5 acres of land that was once mostly turf grass with a few trees, and the area was subject to frequent standing water every time they got a nice rainfall. And that's because it drained about 2 acres of impervious surfaces, the hardened rooftops, the pavement, the parking areas. So we were fortunate to receive a couple grants from our state natural resource agency. One was for a planning study and the other was for the actual construction drawing preparation and the construction of a constructed wetland and a bioswale. And you can see on the schematic there, the bioswale is above the wetland. And the bioswale is a cool feature. The architect and engineer Drew Hayes designed it in the shape of a rattlesnake, which we thought was kind of cool. But you can see on the right a photo of the wetland as it exists and functions today. It's doing beautifully, hosting all sorts of songbirds and amphibians and even some reptiles. So it is around these 2 stormwater treatments that Tidewater Park is being installed. We turned to Compton Incorporated out of Austin, Texas to design these play elements. They're one of the world's leaders in developing active play features, and they really created for us some incredibly unique nature play elements. Now, these are the 4 that were designed, and they reflect traditional Nanticoke stories. One is Turtle Island, their story of creation. The second is How the Beaver Got Its Tail. The third is Squirrel Council, and the 4th is Rainbow Crow. Phase 1, which was Turtle Island and How the Beaver Got Its Tail, were completed last fall. Both are getting a lot of use by children in the area, and it's great to see every time I visit. You can see this beaver here is it's about a 9-foot long beaver, stands almost 7 feet tall. It was custom built for us in the Czech Republic. It's attached to a log scramble that goes into some stepping stones, and then there's a canoe there as well. But at each play piece is an interpretive panel, and on the interpretive panel is an excerpt of that story that is being shared. And in the excerpt, there may be some of the traditional words of the Nanticoke tribe, and that's found in a glossary at the bottom of the square there. And you can hear the entire story as shared by the ancestors and told by Raggy Callentine by simply scanning that QR code. It takes about 10 minutes, and it's a wonderful, wonderful story. So again, at each play piece, you're going to see one of these interpretive panels. Big news for us is that next month, probably by the end of July, we will have phase 2 installed. That includes a swing set. Everyone was asking, where's a swing set? A park has to have a swing set. So we're installing a swing set, as well as a 30 by 30 shade sail structure. Shade's an important feature of the park. We planted about 70 shade trees almost 2 years ago now, but of course they're going to take time to grow to be able to provide ample shade. But those components will be installed by the end of the month. And then even bigger news is that it seems to us that there is great potential for finishing the project with some much needed funding, a large amount of funding. And this is compliments of our 2 US senators, Senator Tom Carper and Senator Chris Coons. They have both raised our request for almost $1 million as part of their congressionally directed spending package, their appropriations request. It came out of committee and it will be included in the federal budget. All we need is for Congress to do what it's constitutionally mandated to do and pass a budget this year. Over the weekend, we got some great news from our local state legislators that they are including at least one of the phases, probably Squirrel Council, at a cost of about $400,000 in their bond bill request. Now, it's kind of interesting that we've got these 2 competing interests. We want to fund the project, but we'll deal with it. It's a good problem to have. Hopefully, what you see in the picture there, Chief Natasha Carmine, as well as spiritual leader Herman Jackson, will be able to return in late 2023, early 2024 to again offer a traditional ceremonial blessing for us when the park is finished. It was great to have them there this past fall. And this is, as expressed to me by the Nanticoke Tribe, an incredibly important project for them. It has helped them again to share their voice, to elevate their language. Now, in association with Tidewater Park and redevelopment of the waterfront are a number of other features. If you'd like to see more about Tidewater Park, you can scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to a virtual tour, a round me tour, and you'll begin to see some of the features that I've already talked about, as well as others. One of the others is a kayak launch that the community expressed when we did those focus group sessions with them about redeveloping the waterfront. This was installed with assistance from the Nanticoke Rotary Club and the town of Laurel back in 2016. And just last summer, we were able to attract a paddle sports outfitter, Quest Adventures, to the town of Laurel to set up a summer business right there next to Tidewater Park. So in addition to daily rentals, we created 3 unique tours on the Broad Creek, including a First People of Broad Creek, the Nanticokes tour. This is a 3.5-hour paddling excursion, and it is interpreted by an associate member of the Nanticoke Tribe, Tommy Thompson. We conducted this tour 3 times last summer. Each of those tours was sold out. For us, an ideal number of kayaks on the water is about 12 to 15. Some of these are tandems, so we're talking 15 to 20 people participating. So it was a success for us. It was a success for the outfitter, and it was considered a success by the Nanticoke Tribe. I do want to acknowledge all the folks you see on the screen here. This is my partner, Dr. Jules Bruck, now the director of landscape, director of the planning school at the University of Florida. She was hugely influential in having the vision for the park, but all these other folks have made this happen. So we're looking forward to continuing to implement these pieces. And again, hopefully by late 2023, early 2024, this project will be completed and it'll be a new attraction that'll really help to bring people back to downtown Laurel. So Wanishi, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ed. That was another, I learned a lot from both of these presentations, and I'm sure our audience members did too. So with that, I'm going to welcome any questions from the audience for any of our 3 guest speakers. While we're waiting for questions to appear in the chat, I think given what Matt and Melissa shared, we kind of know that a really large challenge for the Pointe-aux-Chenes has been Hurricane Ida. I was wondering, Ed, were there any challenges that popped up along the way to the projects that you talked about?
It's a struggle to think of any, so that means no. The biggest challenge is always the funding, and this is a big price tag. These are custom made pieces. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the world. So we actually are further along than I ever dreamed we would be at this point. It's happened fairly quickly. So to consider that it could be done within a year and a half is just an enormous success in my mind and in the mind of many others, but no real problems.
So a question for all of you, all three guest speakers. I was wondering what has been the most unexpected or rewarding aspects of these projects that you've worked on with these communities. If you could share a little bit about that, I think that'd be great for our audiences.
So I guess I'll go first. So I've done the CRI with a lot of communities across the Louisiana coast, as well as in some other Gulf states. And it's not often that we have a dedicated source of funding to do something. And so to see that come to fruition and to see it go from like an idea into, wow, that's an actual project that was constructed, that was definitely the most rewarding for me.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Melissa said, sort of, seeing how invested the tribe was in the process and then in the project that kind of emerged and, the floated to the top as far as what we could use to the limited funds we had to implement, and how the tribe was so invested in it that they even, volunteered their own time and resources to put into the building the dock. They had people that helped put in the mooring pilings. They saved some of their budget for other things by having community members volunteer their time and efforts to help construct where needed, and the dock and bulkhead. So just how invested they are in it, and they continue to be invested in it, even though they went through this horrific event last August, and they're still recovering from that. When we talk with them, they talk about rebuilding back better, more resilient, more sustainable, and they're using this as an opportunity to attract external funding. I think Ed just mentioned, if you could think of any challenge, it's finding the funding, and they're active about looking for funding to rebuild, come back more resilient. And part of that whole vision is diversification, economic development tied to this ecotourism vision that they have, that they want to share their unique culture, the issues they face, but also the challenges and the opportunities they have for adaptation with others. And this dock is just the first part of developing that infrastructure to be able to do that.
I think what's exciting for me, aside from seeing local kids playing at the park almost every time I enter town through Central Avenue, is to have recently met with a prominent developer who is now considering what opportunities he might have there along the Broad Creek waterfront. That wasn't happening prior to some of these projects. As a matter of fact, when we met with developers, 5-6 years ago, they said the area looked too industrial. It needed an improved aesthetic, and they weren't prepared to invest at that time. Well, now there seems to be renewed interest in investing in Laurel, Delaware. So that's really exciting, because that was the goal of that challenge by the community, help bring people and jobs back to downtown Laurel. There was a question about funding for continued maintenance, repairs, litter control. Great question. We do have a maintenance agreement, service maintenance for the Robinia wood. That's black locust, I believe. It's very durable, very tolerant, but it will need repair. So Compton Incorporated offers that. As far as the grounds itself, the town's public works department has taken on that responsibility. We got cooperative extension involved in the master gardening program, so they developed a training manual so that public works doesn't go in and whack down every piece of vegetation they see thinking it's a weed, which often happens. We also have a local church group, a Father's Heart, that has adopted the park, and they organize periodic cleanup crews to go out there. And I've participated in that and put my waders on and jumped in that wetland and pulled out a bunch of garbage. It seems to find its way in there. So the community's doing a fairly nice job of maintaining the park at this point in time.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those responses. I will mention that in just a moment, Melissa Castleberry from our office is going to be entering in an evaluation link into the chat. Oh, there it is. So on there is just a feedback form, and you can just let us know how we did, what you thought of our webinar, the content of our presentations, maybe if there are any unanswered questions that you have, or if you have ideas for future topics, whether they pertain to ecotourism or maybe something completely different. Let us know what you think. We'd love to get your feedback. So with that, I think unless our guest speakers have any final thoughts, I'm just going to wrap up here and say thank you so much to everybody who's hung in there for all 3 webinars, and be expecting an email from me in the next couple of weeks sharing resources and links to the recordings of these webinars, as well as follow up on some of those Q&As that we didn't get to during previous installments of this series. With that, Ed, Matt, Melissa, do you all have any final thoughts you want to share?
Thanks for the invitation. Really enjoyed it, and come up and visit.
Yeah, yeah, I do miss Delaware. For those of you who don't know, I actually used to live in Delaware, which is where I met Ed, and I'm a big fan of it's a small state with a big heart. So, and I would like, just before we go, I would also like to give a huge shout out to Melissa Castleberry, who has been online for all 3 of these webinars, and she is my secret weapon and everything. She helps run the Zoom and keep everything smooth, and just want to say big thanks to her. Couldn't have done this series without her. All right, well, thank you all so much, and please email our guest speakers or me if you have any questions.
Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Absolutely.